An old black man dressed in tattered clothes walked into a Liberty Bank and quietly declared, "This bank is mine." The crowd immediately burst into mocking laughter, and the security guard moved toward him to escort him out. But as he slowly opened the worn-out bag on his shoulder, all laughter turned into stunned silence. Suddenly, the bank door swung open, attracting all the curious and mocking glances from the crowd inside. A figure slowly stepped in. It was an old black man. His hair, a tangled mess of silver curls, his face etched with the harsh marks of time and hardship. He wore a thick, dark brown coat patched up in several places, covered in dirt, as though it had seen countless years of wandering. His shoes were worn out, the soles frayed, and every step he took seemed slow and laborious. On his shoulder was a rough, frayed canvas bag. Faded by time, looking heavy upon seeing him, people inside the bank immediately began whispering to each other in low voices. Every head in the Hartford branch turned. It wasn't just his leather jacket, worn smooth at the elbows but still holding its 1980s cut, or his salt and pepper beard, trimmed neat as a hedge fund manager's. It was the way he walked, shoulders back like a man entering his own boardroom, despite the way his left knee stiffened in the damp cold. "Sir?" The receptionist's acrylic nails paused over her keyboard. Her gaze flicked from his scuffed Oxfords to the duffel bag slung across his chest. "The welfare office is 2 blocks. This is the place." Mac's voice was calm, deep as a vault door closing. He adjusted the bag's strap, revealing a glint of gold cufflinks engraved with Liberty's original logo, a broken chain. A snicker rippled through the line of suited bankers. Tyler Whitmore, his navy Tom Ford suit costing more than Mac's entire outfit, leaned against the mortgage desk. "Looks like Grandpa got lost on his way to bingo night." The laughter hit like hail. Mac's fingers twitched toward his wrist, an old tell. His Rolex, a 1987 Oyster Perpetual, ticked steadily beneath his frayed cuff. He walked past the velvet ropes toward Daniel Ruiz, the branch manager, who was frowning at a foreclosure notice. "Mr. Ruiz." Daniel looked up, irritation melting into confusion. "Do I know you?" Mac set his duffel on the counter with a thud that made the pens tremble. "You should. I own this bank." For 3 heartbeats, the only sound was the antique clock Mac had chosen himself during the '87 renovation. Then the laughter erupted. Tyler doubled over, face red as a stock market crash. "Christ, I needed this today. A broke old black guy thinks he's—" Mac unzipped the duffel. The sound silenced Tyler mid-sentence. Inside lay a yellowed Wall Street Journal from October 16, 1987, the day after Black Monday. The headline screamed, "Local Prodigy's Bank Stays Strong," beside a photo of a younger Mac, crisp-suited, shaking hands with the mayor. Aisha Carter, the 22-year-old intern, gasped. "That's you?" Tyler snatched the paper. "Photoshop doesn't age well, Pops." But his thumb rubbed nervously over the date stamp. Mac reached into the bag again. This time, his arthritic fingers emerged holding a key, one that matched the security deposit boxes lining the west wall. Daniel's coffee cup hit the floor, because every Liberty Bank manager knew those original keys had been destroyed in 1991. The security deposit box opened with a sound like a vault door sighing after 30 years. Daniel Ruiz's hands trembled as he lifted out the contents. Not dust-covered relics, but meticulously preserved evidence in crisp plastic sleeves. First came the photograph. The colors had faded to sepia tones, but the image remained clear. 2 young bankers shaking hands beneath the Liberty Savings and Trust sign. One was clearly a younger Mac, his afro perfectly rounded, his 3-piece suit sharper than any in the room today. The other man's face made Tyler Whitmore go pale. That can't be," Tyler stammered. "Your grandfather," Mac finished. "Charles Whitmore III. Taken June 15, 1987, opening day. Aisha zoomed her phone camera on the photo's timestamp, the image projecting onto the bank's digital rate board. The younger staff members gasped as they recognized the same lobby they stood in, just with wood paneling instead of marble. Next came the documents. Mac handled them with the care of an archivist, his thick fingers surprisingly nimble as he unfolded the partnership agreement. The notary seal was still visible, the signature still dark with 30-year-old ink. Article 4, Section B, Mac read aloud. All withdrawals over $50,000 require both partners' signatures. He flipped to a marked page in the ledger. Curious how this $750,000 withdrawal only has one. The entry was damning in its simplicity. *03/15/88, $750,000, C. Whitmore III, Capital Investment. Daniel, who'd been reviewing loan applications all morning, did the math instantly. That's nearly 80% of our 1987 operating capital. The air left the room. Even the junior tellers understood what that meant. Tyler lunged for the documents. These could be forgeries. You expect us to believe? Check the microprint, Max said calmly. He pointed to nearly invisible text along the ledger's margin, Liberty's original anti-fraud measure, something only employees would know. Your current books still use the same pattern, just smaller now. Aisha's sharp eyes caught something else. This memo attached to the March 88 minutes. It's from Charles Whitmore to the board. Mac nodded. Dated 2 weeks after the unauthorized withdrawal. Notice the language. The memo contained careful corporate speak about restructuring and new leadership. But one phrase stood out, given recent medical assessments of Mr. Beaumont's condition. From his jacket pocket, Mac produced the final piece, a single sheet of letterhead from Hartford Medical Associates. The diagnosis was brief, the racism barely veiled. Patient demonstrates stress-induced financial delusions common among males of his demographic. Recommend reduced fiscal responsibilities. The signature belonged to Dr. Benjamin Langley. That's impossible, Tyler whispered. Dr. Langley was the most respected psychiatrist in Hartford, Mac finished. Also, your grandfather's college roommate. The revelation hung in the air until the oldest teller, Mrs. Ruiz, no relation to Daniel, spoke up. I remember that spring. Mr. Beaumont disappeared for 3 weeks. When he came back, she trailed off, looking at Mac with dawning horror. Mac met her gaze without flinching. I was at Hartford General. Voluntary commitment, they called it. His fingers tapped the ledger. Long enough for Charles to move the money and change the locks. Then came the coup de grace, a microcassette recorder so ancient most staffers had never seen one. When Mac pressed play, Charles Whitmore's voice filled the room with chilling clarity. Langley says 2 weeks should do it. By the time Malcolm gets out, the board will have voted. Just remember, that penthouse we discussed for your niece? That's contingent on the right diagnosis. A younger voice, unmistakably Tyler's father, laughed. Don't worry, Benny's written these before. What was it he called it? Ambition disorder? The recording ended there. In the silence that followed, Max simply closed the ledger with a soft thump. The sound echoed through the lobby like the closing of a coffin. The cassette tape's click as it ended might as well have been a gun cocking. Tyler Whitmore's hands shook so badly the Polaroid fluttered to the floor, Mac's younger face staring up at him beside the grandfather he'd idolized. You lying son of a... Tyler lunged for the ledger, but Aisha was faster. Her phone streamed everything to 12,000 followers as she stepped between them, the bank's original key dangling from her free hand like a weapon. Corporate security! Tyler barked at Daniel, sweat bleeding through his $3,000 suit. Now! Daniel didn't move. His father's words from 1991 looped in his head. "We're just following orders." The coffee stain on his shoes seemed to grow darker. Max sighed, rubbing his aching knee. Always the same playbook. From his duffel, he pulled a Bronx Safe Deposit Company key stamped C. Whitmore III. "Your granddaddy rented this the day he fired me. Guess he forgot to update the signature card." A collective gasp. Tyler's nostrils flared. "That's impossible." "Box 219, Mac continued calmly, "holds copies of every document in this ledger, plus the 1988 audio of Charles bribing Dr. Langley with a penthouse apartment." He tilted his head. "Funny how history repeats. Your dad tried to have me committed in '92 when I threatened to expose them." The security team arrived, 3 ex-cops in too tight uniforms. Their leader, Briggs, reached for Mac's arm. Aisha's voice cut through the tension. "Officer, you should know. Bronx Safe Deposit streams 24/7 to the New York Times archives for historical preservation." She smiled sweetly. "Mr. Beaumont set it up in 1993. Briggs froze. Tyler made a sound like a deflating balloon. Then the front doors burst open, news cameras, microphones, and leading the pack, Congresswoman Elise Martinez, Mac's former mentee from the Bronx Youth Finance Program. Malcolm Beaumont! She embraced him like a father. The cameras caught everything, her tears, Mac's steadying hand on her back, and Tyler Whitmore shrinking behind the mortgage desk like a child playing dress-up. Martinez turned to the room, mic live. 36 years ago, this man taught me compound interest on a park bench. Today, we compound justice." She nodded to Aisha, who projected the ledger onto the bank's digital rate board. Page 117 lit up the lobby. $1. 2 million transferred. C. Whitmore III. Charity donation. The recipient. A shell company that bought Charles his first yacht. Mac finally let his anger show, just a flicker in his eyes as he addressed the cameras. Liberty Bank was built on 2 things, my math and Charles Whitmore's lies. Time to rebalance the books. As officers escorted Tyler out in cuffs, tax evasion it turned out, Mac knelt with a groan to pick up the fallen Polaroid. His arthritic fingers traced his younger face, then Charles's smug grin. "Interest accrues, Charlie," he whispered. Then louder to Daniel, "You keeping that foreclosure file open, or should I handle it?" The bank staff erupted in applause. The fluorescent lights of Liberty Bank's boardroom hummed like a swarm of bees as Daniel Ruiz slid his resignation letter across the polished mahogany table. His hands no longer shook, not after watching Tyler Whitmore get hauled out in handcuffs, his tailored suit jacket draped over his wrist to hide the silver gleam of restraints. "Effective immediately," the letter read. The board members, all white men over 50, all handpicked by the Whitmore family, stared at Daniel like he'd just set fire to the vault. "You're throwing away 20 years over some old news," spat Richard Caldwell, his jowls trembling. "That Beaumont lunatic should be in a home, not—" Daniel stood abruptly, his chair screeching. "That lunatic built this bank's foundation while your mentor stole from widows' accounts." He yanked open the ledger still on the table, to a page flagged with a sticky note. "Recognize this?" The room froze. It was a 1989 internal memo, typed on Liberty letterhead. Per C. Whitmore III. Deny loan applications from zip codes 10453, 10458. Too many high-risk demographics. Aisha, now promoted to interim branch manager, leaned in from the doorway. Those were Bronx zip codes, mostly Black and Latino neighborhoods. She held up her phone, where a viral Twitter thread compared the memo to modern-day redlining at Liberty. Funny how history repeats. Across town, Max sat in a sunlit Bronx classroom, his ledger open on the desk before him. The students weren't finance majors. They were formerly incarcerated men, their hands still calloused from years of prison labor, leaning forward as Mac pointed to an entry. December 1987, $250 charitable donation to NYPD Benevolent Association. Charles paid cops to arrest me twice, Mac said, tapping the numbers. First time, they said I fit the description of a robbery suspect. Second time? He flipped to a photo of his younger self being hauled out of Liberty Bank, his suit jacket torn at the shoulder. Trespassing at my own damn bank. A murmur rippled through the room. A broad-shouldered man named Javier, paroled after 12 years for a drug charge he swore wasn't his, let out a bitter chuckle. So what's the lesson? Rich folks always win? Max slid a calculator across the table. Lesson is, they keep winning if we don't learn the rules. He nodded at the ledger. Charles stole millions, but he got sloppy, left a paper trail. That's your leverage. Javier frowned at the columns of numbers. Ain't no ledgers in the hood. Wrong. Mac pulled out a stack of payday loan receipts from the students' own neighborhoods, each with 300% interest rates circled in red. These are your ledgers. And now? He handed Javier a fresh notebook. You keep your own. Back at Liberty, Aisha stared at the brass nameplate she'd just hung on her new office door. Aisha Carter, VP of Community Relations. The irony wasn't lost on her. The same bank that denied her mother a mortgage now needed her to salvage its reputation. Her first email was to Mac. Your offer. You were right. They're giving me a diversity initiative budget to shut us up. How do you want to use it? His reply came in under a minute. Buy every one of Javier's guys a suit, then bring them to the shareholder meeting. Attached was a list. 12 X-tailored suits, $1,500 each. 12 X financial literacy textbooks, 1 X vintage 1987 Liberty Bank keychain. eBay, $22.50. P.S. Tell Daniel I saved him a seat at the table. Aisha smiled. The keychain was a replica of the one that started it all. The rain streaked down Liberty Bank's glass walls like prison bars, melting as Javier adjusted his tie for the fourth time. The navy silk felt alien against his calloused fingers, still rough from years of loading dock work after his release. Behind him, 11 other men from Mac's program stood in uneasy silence, their new Oxfords squeaking on the polished floor. Aisha met them at the boardroom doors, her VP badge catching the light. They're panicking, she murmured, handing Javier a folder. Caldwell just had security sweep the room for recording devices. Javier's knuckles whitened around Mac's handwritten instructions. The last time he'd faced a panel of suited men, they'd given him 25 to life. Today, he carried something more powerful than a shiv, 18% of Liberty's voting shares. The boardroom chatter died when they entered. Richard Caldwell's coffee cup froze halfway to his lips, his eyes darting between Javier's tattooed hands and the proxy certificates Aisha placed on the table. This is absurd, Caldwell's jowls quivered. These gentlemen can't possibly… Article 7, Section 2. Mac's voice crackled through the speakerphone, calm as a judge pronouncing sentence. 15% shareholder threshold for motions. You wrote that after the '89 housing protest, Richard. Meant to keep activists from disrupting your little club. Javier took the empty seat at the head of the table, Tyler Whitmore's chair. The leather still held the bastard's cologne. He laid out Mac's 3 demands, watching Caldwell's face twitch at each one. Forensic audit of all loan denials since 1987. Immediate freeze on evictions in Red Line Neighborhood's Bronx branch renamed under Mac's name, Caldwell's fountain pen snapped in his grip. We'll see what counsel says about… Already did. Aisha projected an email onto the screen. Liberty's own lawyers confirming the motions were valid. The timestamp showed Mac had sent it at 4:59 a.m. Javier leaned forward, the table's edge pressing into his forearms like the cuff of a parole anklet. "While y'all was laughing at crazy old Mac," he said quietly, "that man was tracing every dirty dollar." He slid a spreadsheet toward Caldwell, like this $1.8 million charity donation in '92 that bought Charles Whitmore's yacht. The room temperature dropped 10 degrees. Aisha's phone buzzed. She smiled. Congresswoman Martinez's office just subpoenaed Liberty's tax records. Funny timing. When the votes passed 18-3, Javier didn't cheer. He walked to the window and watched the rain cleanse the sidewalk where Mac had stood that first day, an old man in a worn jacket, waiting for justice to compound. The forensic accountants arrived at Liberty Bank at dawn, their black briefcases out of place against the Bronx branch's cracked linoleum floors. Javier watched from Mac's old desk, now his, as they pried open filing cabinets sealed since the Reagan administration. Dust motes swirled in the morning light like tiny ghosts rising from the records. Aisha handed him the first red flag at 9:15 a.m. "Look at this 87 loan denial." She pointed to a faded application where the reason field simply read, Area 53, Liberty's internal code for black neighborhoods. Beneath it, a carbon copy showed the same application approved 2 weeks later, after the white applicant listed a Park Avenue address. Javier's stomach turned. He'd grown up in Area 53. By noon, the conference table groaned under evidence. 1989. $2.3 million in construction loans funneled to Whitmore Family Properties 1994. 317 Bronx applicants denied despite identical credentials to approved suburbanites 2008. Predatory reverse mortgages targeting elderly black homeowners. At 2:17 p.m., the youngest accountant, a Haitian woman named Claudine, unearthed the motherlode, a ledger within the ledger. Special investments, the brittle label read. Page after page of Liberty's darkest secrets, $50K/month to a judge who fast-tracked Whitmore foreclosures, consulting fees to 3 city councilmen who blocked banking reform, and the kicker, a $750K entry dated 2 days after Mac's ousting. B. Langley, final payment, discretion guaranteed. Javier's hands shook. He'd seen enough prison deals to recognize a payoff. 3 floors up, Richard Caldwell shredded documents in a panic, his custom cufflinks catching on the industrial shredder. He didn't notice Aisha leaning in the doorway, filming silently with her phone. "Going somewhere, Richard?" The chairman whirled, confetti of guilt sticking to his sweat-soaked shirt. "You don't understand what you're playing with, girl. These records protect people." Aisha stepped forward, tapping her screen. A live feed showed Congresswoman Martinez addressing a press crowd outside, holding up the special investments ledger. Or just men like you. The shredder jammed with a dying whine. That evening, Mac sat on his Bronx fire escape, the orange glow of sunset reflecting off the ledger in his lap. Below, news vans swarmed Liberty Bank like ants on spilled honey. His burner phone buzzed. A text from Javier, found B. Langley, Bronx Mercy Hospital, stage 4 pancreatic. Mac sighed, tracing the $750K entry with his thumb. Some debts couldn't be repaid with money. He grabbed his cane and jacket. Time to collect. The silence after the tape ended was so absolute that the ticking of the antique clock sounded like gunshots. Then chaos erupted. Tyler lunged for the cassette player, but Aisha was faster, her phone still recording as she stepped between them. "That's evidence, Mr. Whitmore." Daniel Ruiz stared at the ledger like it might burst into flames. His father had been assistant manager during the '91 remodel. "Just following orders," he'd always said. Now those orders had a name. Across the lobby, Mrs. Ruiz, the head teller who'd worked at Liberty since the Reagan administration, pressed a shaking hand to her mouth. "I served coffee at that board meeting," she whispered. "I heard them laughing about. Mac didn't move. He just watched the realization dawn across their faces. The way their eyes darted from the ledger to Tyler to the vault where Charles Whitmore's portrait still hung. Click. The sound came from the front doors. Everyone turned as two uniformed officers entered, but they weren't Hartford PD. These were state investigators, their badges glinting under the chandeliers. "Tyler Whitmore?" The lead investigator held up a folded document. "We have a warrant to seize all records related to Liberty's 1987 through 1992 transactions." Tyler's laugh was shrill. "You're joking. Over some senile old man's fairy tale." The investigator cut him off. "This is regarding a whistleblower complaint filed 29 years ago by a Malcolm Beaumont." She turned to Mac. "The Attorney General's office finally pulled it for review last week." Mac's nod was barely perceptible. He'd waited decades for this moment, not with clenched fists, but with perfect stillness. Aisha's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, then gasped. "Congresswoman Martinez is holding a press conference right now about historic banking discrimination." Her eyes flew to Mac. "She's holding this ledger." Tyler staggered back against the mortgage desk. "You set this up." Mac finally moved then, just a slight adjustment of his cufflinks, the ones with Liberty's original broken chain logo. "No, son. I just stopped waiting for you to do the right thing." As the investigators began boxing up files, Daniel Ruiz did something unexpected. He walked to the vault and removed Charles Whitmore's portrait himself. The frame hit the marble with a sound like shattering glass. 2 hours later, the rain had started again, sheeting down Liberty's windows as Max stood under the awning watching news vans swarm the block. Aisha joined him, her blazer damp at the shoulders. "They found the money," she said quietly. "All $750,000. Whitmore parked it in a Cayman account under his housekeeper's name." Mac didn't react. His eyes were on the construction site across the street, a luxury condo development with a banner proclaiming, "Coming 2024, the Whitmore Residences." "Not anymore," he said at last. Aisha followed his gaze to where investigators were now entering the site. Then she handed Mac a small envelope. "From Mrs. Ruiz." Inside was a key, not to a deposit box, but to a modest Bronx apartment. The note read simply, "Your place is waiting, always was." Mac's fingers closed around it. After 30 years, he was finally going home. The Bronx apartment smelled of lemon polish and old books. Mac stood in the doorway, his duffel bag hanging heavy from his shoulder, taking in the unchanged space. The same floral wallpaper from 1991, the same dent in the kitchen floor where he dropped a skillet full of grits the morning Charles Whitmore called him in for that urgent meeting. Mrs. Ruiz had kept it all. A coffee table book caught his eye. Black Wall Street, The Untold History. When he flipped it open, a yellow deposit slip fluttered out. $5,000. Liberty Savings and Trust. Dated 2 days before his forced retirement. The memo line read, "For Malcolm's next venture." His throat tightened. She'd believed him all along. Liberty Bank, 2 days later. The renamed Beaumont Community Financial buzzed with unfamiliar energy. Aisha had replaced the mahogany desks with collaborative work tables, the stuffy oil paintings with vibrant murals by local artists. Javier Ortiz, now head of community outreach, leaned over a young couple's mortgage application. "See this line here? That's the old Whitmore trick to jack up your rate." He circled the clause with a Beaumont Financial pen. "We don't play that." Across the room, Daniel Ruiz trained tellers on the new system. "When Mr. Beaumont says, Look deeper. He means, check the zip code history, the staff chorused. They'd all memorized Mac's rule after the audit revealed Liberty had denied loans to entire neighborhoods based on 1980s redlining maps. Aisha watched from her glass office, smiling at the framed front page of the Hartford Courant. Beaumont vindicated. State seizes Whitmore assets in historic banking fraud case. Her phone buzzed. A text from Mac. Found more special investments. Bring the team. Attached was an address, the condemned Whitmore residence's construction site. The construction site. The half-built luxury tower loomed like a skeleton in the rain. Mac waited under a tarp with Congresswoman Martinez and 2 federal agents, his cane tapping impatiently against a stack of metal cases. "Took you long enough," he grumbled when Aisha's car pulled up. Javier helped him pry open the first case. Inside lay rows of safety deposit boxes, the original ones from Liberty's 1991 remodel, each labeled with a numbered tag. "Whitmore kept the evidence?" Daniel asked, horrified. Max snorted. "Men like Charles collect trophies." He handed Martinez box #217. Inside were photos of Dr. Langley shaking hands with a judge, both holding golf clubs at Whitmore's Martha's Vineyard estate. Beneath them, a ledger page showing $12,000 monthly consulting fees to the judge, coincidentally, the same judge who'd approved Mac's involuntary commitment. Martinez whistled. "This goes straight to the Justice Department." As the agents loaded the boxes, Mac turned to Aisha. "One more stop." Bronx Mercy Hospital. The oncology ward smelled like antiseptic and wilted flowers. Dr. Benjamin Langley IV, grandson of Mac's tormentor, stood frozen in the doorway of room 312. His dying father's monitor beeped steadily as Mac placed 2 items on the bedside table. The original psychiatric evaluation labeling Mac delusional. A photo of Langley's signature on a $750,000 check from Charles Whitmore. The old man's eyes widened. "Malcolm, I was just following orders," Mac finished. He adjusted the oxygen tube with surprising gentleness. "I know." From his pocket he produced a third item, a Beaumont financial check for $750,000 payable to Langley's hospice charity. "Difference is," Max said, "mine's real." As he walked out, the heart monitor's rhythm stuttered, just once, before steadying again. The wrecking ball swung at dawn, its steel arc glinting pink in the rising sun. Mac watched from the sidewalk as the crane tore into the Whitmore residence's half-finished skeleton, concrete dust blooming like ghosts escaping their tomb. Aisha handed him a hard hat stenciled with Beaumont Community Development, project director. "You sure you don't want to do the honors?" Max shook his head, nodding toward Javier. The younger man stood with a group of teenagers from the Bronx program, their eyes wide as the crane operator, a woman Javier had trained, brought down another pillar. "Let them see it fall," Max said. 6 months later, the construction site buzzed with different energy now. Instead of luxury condos, the blueprints showed mixed-income units with a child care center and community bank branch. Javier walked the site with city inspectors, pointing out features Mac had insisted on. Steel-reinforced walls, after the '87 audit found Whitmore used cheap materials. Solar panels, powered by the same company that installed Liberty's original faulty wiring. A mural wall where the lobby fountain would have been, already painted with local kids' handprints. At the center stood a glass case displaying the original ledger, left open to a page showing Charles Whitmore's first fraudulent withdrawal. "Not hiding history anymore," Javier told the press. Hartford Courthouse, sentencing day. Tyler Whitmore shuffled into court in an ill-fitting suit, his once-perfect hair now streaked with gray. The judge, a black woman appointed after the corruption purge, read the verdict without looking up. 30 months for financial fraud, plus full restitution to affected account holders. Across the aisle, Max sat with Mrs. Ruiz and 3 generations of families denied loans under Liberty's redlining policies. When Tyler was led out in cuffs, Mac didn't smile, just nodded once. Justice wasn't sweet. It was balanced. That evening, Mac's apartment was full for the first time in decades. Aisha reviewing branch applications at the kitchen table, Javier teaching Mrs. Ruiz's grandkids to track expenses in their own mini ledgers, Congresswoman Martinez mixing drinks with a prosecutor from the DOJ. The doorbell rang. A lanky white teenager stood there, clutching a Beaumont Financial Scholarship letter. Tyler Whitmore Jr. swallowed hard. "Mr. Beaumont, I didn't know." Max studied the boy's face, the same sharp chin as Charles, but with his mother's anxious eyes. He stepped aside. "Come in," he said. "We're just starting dinner." As the door closed behind them, the ledger on Mac's shelf fell open to a fresh page, blank except for a single entry at the top. Interest paid in full. The morning sun slanted through the stained glass windows of Howard University's finance hall, painting golden rectangles across the ledger displayed on the lectern. Mac adjusted his glasses, new bifocals after years of squinting at fine print, and surveyed the packed auditorium. Front row center, Whitmore Jr., now a sophomore, scribbling notes in the same leather-bound journal Mac had given him on his first day interning at Beaumont Financial. 3 rows back, Javier's daughter, her hair in braids threaded with gold beads that clinked when she nodded at Mac's points about ethical investing. And in the very last row, half hidden in shadow, an elderly white man in an expensive but rumpled suit, clutching a Panama hat. Tyler Whitmore, out on early parole. Mac didn't pause his lecture. "Most textbooks will tell you compound interest is a mathematical function," he said, tapping the ledger. "But real compounding? That's what happens when you invest in people." He flipped to a page marked with a blue ribbon, the record of every scholarship, small business loan, and community grant issued since Liberty became Beaumont Financial. Javier Ortiz, Mac called. The now CEO stood from the faculty section, his tailored suit unable to hide the gang tattoo peeking above his collar. "First loan, $15,000 for a bodega expansion, repaid with 5% interest." "Aisha Carter?" The Treasury Secretary-designate smiled from the live stream screen on her desk. "First microloan to a Haitian seamstress, now supplies uniforms for 6 public schools." One by one, voices called out amounts and addresses. $500 for a used delivery bike in Baltimore, $2,000 for a Bronx daycare's playground, $50,000 to rebuild a church burned in '92 after its pastor applied for a loan Whitmore denied. When Mac finally turned to the last row, the room held its breath. "Charles Whitmore III," he said quietly. "Investment. 1 fraudulent bank. Return. 30 years of stolen time." Tyler stood on shaking legs. For a long moment, father and son just looked at each other across the rows of students, some nodding, some confused, one black girl openly weeping. Then Whitmore Jr. stood too. "And my tuition," he said firmly. "Investment, 1 scholarship, return, TBD." The tension broke like a wave. Laughter and applause filled the hall as Mac turned back to the ledger. With a flourish, he wrote in fresh ink, asterisk, 2023, present, priceless. Asterisk epilogue. The reception afterward buzzed with chatter and jazz from Howard's student quartet. Mac slipped away to the empty lecture hall where the ledger lay open under the stained glass light. From his pocket, he drew out the last item, Charles Whitmore's unsigned, undated apology letter found in the safety deposit box with the bribe records. He hesitated, then tucked it between the final pages. Some debts, Mac had learned, were never about the money. Outside, Whitmore Jr. waited under a blossoming cherry tree, 2 cups of coffee in hand. When Mac joined him, the younger man asked the question that had haunted him for 3 years. Why? Mac sipped his coffee, black, no sugar, before answering. Because vengeance compounds too. He nodded toward the students spilling out of the building, Javier's daughter now teaching Whitmore Jr.'s little sister how to read the ledger. And somebody had to break the cycle. As they walked toward the waiting car, the spring wind turned the ledger's pages gently, revealing one last surprise Mac had left for whoever opened it next. A blank check. Payable to underscore 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 amount. Enough. Mac's story is a powerful reminder that injustice, no matter how deeply buried by time or power, cannot erase the truth or the worth of those it targets. His quiet defiance in the face of humiliation, his unwavering readiness to prove his dignity, and his refusal to let age or prejudice define him speak to a universal truth. Your value isn't determined by those who underestimate you, but by the strength of your character and the truth you carry. For decades, Mac held on to the evidence of his stolen legacy, not out of bitterness, but because he knew that truth, like a seed in winter, just needs the right moment to bloom. His journey teaches us that standing up for justice isn't about vengeance, it's about restoration. It's about showing the world that integrity outlasts lies, and that even the quietest voice, when rooted in truth, can shake foundations. This story also invites us to reflect on the systems and silences that enable injustice, whether in boardrooms, families, or everyday interactions. Mac's victory wasn't just reclaiming his name. It was exposing how prejudice masquerades as policy and how complicity thrives in whispers. For anyone who's felt dismissed, underestimated, or erased, your story isn't over. Like Mac, you can turn your pain into proof and your resilience into a roadmap for others. If this story resonated with you, share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever witnessed or overcome a similar injustice? Hit the like button to honor the Macs in your life, and subscribe for more stories that challenge, inspire, and remind us of the power of truth. May you carry your truth with the same quiet courage, and may the years ahead bring you the peace of being seen, heard, and valued exactly as you are.